Introduction to Part 3, the Tactical Hotbox. A Sam Tracer adventure. There is a fine line between a highly coordinated Black Ops infiltration and an intergalactic string of profound, THC-fueled misdemeanors. In Part 3, the Tactical Hotbox, Sam Tracer and his iridescent synthetic partner, Biff, gleefully obliterate that line. To rescue a captive, billion-year-old cosmic deity from the most heavily fortified subterranean military base on Earth, you don't need an army. You just need a 1990s-era stealth triangle, 7-cat crew, and the universe's most philosophically potent botanical sample. But a heist of this magnitude requires preparation. Before dropping out of the quantum lattice into the airspace above Dulce, New Mexico, to execute the ultimate tactical hotbox of the military-industrial complex, our heroes must make a pit stop, armed with a newly spliced god rod, a chunk of glowing alien flora functioning as a router for the universe's base 144 exotic internet. The TR-3B Betsy executes a dangerously loud fusion jump directly into a highly classified Nevada exotic evidence warehouse. The objective: steal back the legendary Hacienda Hotel invisibility suits from the Deep State Watchers. What follows is a masterclass in chaotic Maui logic. While a terrified night shift security guard rationalizes away the seismic thud of a 90-foot spacecraft parallel parking inside his sub-basement, Sam and Biff liberate the stealth tech and a few confiscated musical zippers right out from under the government's nose. In the process, they inadvertently unleash a pair of intensely spiteful interdimensional poltergeists, who promptly trap themselves inside black-budget tactical armor, leaving the warehouse in a state of mangled, thrashing, metamaterial confusion. Now, fully cloaked and riding the perfectly silent, mathematically flawless currents of the exotic internet, Betsy is hurtling toward the Archuleta Mesa. The automated Chronos arrest device is rapidly cultivating a massive canopy of the highest strain in the universe, and Sam's musical Zippo is ready. The stage is set. The deep state is about to get thoroughly, philosophically sedated. Chapter 17. Exotic Internet and the Hacienda Protocol. The interior of the TR-3B Betsy was warm, smelling faintly of Earl Grey tea, synthetic cheeseburgers, and the undeniable, lingering aroma of billion-year-old cosmic flora. Outside the cockpit viewport, the desolate grey expanse of the Delport crater stretched out in absolute silence. But they were not alone. Hovering just at the edge of the Atlas vessel's massive shadow were the Sentinels. They hadn't fully manifested into physical matter, but their projected avatars hung in the quantum ether. If a 10-billion-year-old AI consciousness could experience profound, localized exhaustion, it was happening right now. The ancient watchers looked exactly like a row of statues of Plato, spectral, glowing figures with their heads buried deeply and dramatically in their hands. Sam Tracer, currently completely ignoring the face-palming cosmic guardians outside his window, took another bite of his double cheeseburger. "Okay, Biff," Sam said, gesturing with a French fry toward the navigation console. "We've got the Dulce layout, but before we fire up the cold pull engine and jump back to Earth, I have an IT question. Did you manage to skim anything from that base 144 operating system? Anything we could, integrate into Betsy?" Sam patted the dashboard affectionately. "Not that our girl here is bad. She's a classic, but that Atlas setup, the bioluminescence, the floating geometry, it was undeniably cooler." Biff stood beside the pilot's chair, carefully cleaning the micro-laser edges of the surgical shears. He didn't look up, but his internal processors hummed in quiet agreement. While replicating the sheer computational mass of a sovereign-class seed vessel is structurally impossible for a ship of Betsy's dimensions, "Sam, I did acquire something highly practical," Biff replied. He reached into the tricorder's tesseract void and gently pulled out the vacuum-sealed sample bag containing the massive, frosty trichome cluster. "The god rod evidence," Biff stated, holding the glowing green and white botanical sample up to the light. "Because this flora has grown within the ship's localized unified field for 1 billion years, its cellular structure is permanently quantum entangled with the Atlas data core. If I hardwire this sample into Betsy's communications relay, We can use its zero-point resonance as a tether. We can read the Atlas data field in real time, no matter where we are in the solar system. Sam stopped chewing, his Maui logic instantly translating the high-end physics into practical terminology. So, it's like an exotic internet router, a router made of cosmic weed. A crude analogy, but functionally accurate, Biff nodded. Furthermore, by tapping into this exotic internet, I can integrate two specific enhancements to our current flight systems. Biff paused, shifting his synthetic cadence into what they both mutually understood as Sam speak. First, Biff ticked off a polished finger. I can crosswire the base 144 harmonic into Betsy's inertial dampeners. In your terms, no more turbulence when we hit a dark matter pothole. The ride will be as smooth as the Atlas slip wave. The Earl Grey stays in the cup. Love that. A frictionless Cadillac, Sam agreed enthusiastically. And the second? Second, I can utilize the unified field telemetry to upgrade our passive radar, Biff continued. In your terms, the GPS will now tell us where the terrestrial black ops interceptors are approximately 3 seconds before the interceptors themselves know they are moving. Predictive cosmic radar, Sam grinned, highly satisfied. A good idea. I knew stealing from the ancients was. He finished off the burger, wiped his hands on a napkin, and leaned forward, his expression turning serious. He tapped the red hexagon of the Dulce facility pulsing on the holographic display. All right, the tactical hotbox plan is solid. We throttle into the intake valves and smoke out the base. But Biff, getting Betsy into the airspace is only half the battle. If we have to actually go down into level 7 to physically guide the pilot out, we can't just stroll through a suffocating military base in our bright orange spacesuits. They might be philosophically sedated by the smoke, but they still have guns. Sam looked up at his iridescent partner. We need invisible suits, like that case we investigated back at the Hacienda Hotel. You recall the Hacienda, right, Biff? Biff's optical sensors flared amber for a fraction of a second, as he accessed his deep storage memory files. I recall it perfectly, Sam, Biff replied, his tone flattening into absolute deadpan. Las Vegas, 2018. We spent 3 days attempting to track a localized poltergeist that was disrupting the higher roller baccarat tables. It ultimately turned out to be a rogue, localized cloaking field generated by a malfunctioning DARPA prototype left in the minibar. Exactly, Sam said, pointing a finger at the android. Those DARPA guys couldn't be seen unless they tripped over a room service cart. If we are going to walk a kidnapped deity out of a subterranean fortress, we need the Hacienda protocol. Can you use the exotic internet to bend the light around our suits? Biff looked down at the glowing botanical sample in his hand, running a hyper-fast calculation on the physics of bending the visible light spectrum using base 144 harmonics. It will require rerouting power from the life support systems directly into the metamaterial fibers of our spacesuits, Biff concluded. But yes, Sam, I can synthesize a localized, temporary cloaking field. We will be invisible. Perfect, Sam said, reaching over to engage the TR-3B's primary thrusters. God rod, Biff. Next stop, New Mexico. Let's hook up the triage and the feline fleet. Back in the secure, softly lit confines of Betsy's primary cargo bay, Sam Tracer had established a makeshift botanical triage center over a stainless steel workbench. The air was thick with the scent of interstellar citrus and ancient pine, as he carefully sectioned the massive, frosty trichome cluster they had liberated from the Atlas. Using a sterile scalpel, Sam divided the billion-year-old payload into 3 highly specific tactical assets. All right, Biff, Sam announced, sliding the first, intricately structured piece across the steel surface. Here is the IT department, as requested. This was the sample destined for the silver-lined, electromagnetic grow tent situated right next to the TR-3B's primary server rack. It was to be the God Rod, the quantum-entangled tether that Biff would hardwire directly into Betsy's comms array, to access the exotic internet of the unified field. Acknowledged, Biff replied, stepping up to the bench. In his left hand, The android held a spool of military-grade fiber-optic cabling, in his right, a massive, reinforced bag of premium terrestrial cat kibble. Sam slid the second, slightly smaller piece into a specialized, humid ore-like lockbox from Morale and R&D, going straight into the quick dryer. This one is the quick dryer was a piece of proprietary, highly localized heating tech Sam had initially invented for sheer impatience. It was his go-to emergency tool for the times his personal stash ran low, and he was forced to conduct sneak raids on Betsy's internal hydroponic pot garden. Usually right before the ship's automated gardening armature aggressively shooed him out of the bay with a blast of warm mist. The alien sample needed a fast, clean cure if Sam was going to sample it properly on the flight to New Mexico. And finally, Sam said, holding up the largest, heaviest chunk of the base 144 flora. It dripped with golden, zero-point resin. The payload. He placed it carefully into a stasis pod. This goes to the Auto Gardener. It's officially the new, high lunar speculative Maui strain. We're going to load this right into the Chronosaurus device. It'll occupy the accelerator for a little while, but we need it to reach Dulce bunker smokeout size. Before we drop out of the vortal, I want a canopy so thick they won't be able to see their own clipboards down there. The tactical hotbox yield will be optimized, Sam, Biff assured him, though his optical sensors were currently focused on the deck plates. While simultaneously calculating the base 144 routing protocols necessary to patch a living cosmic plant into a 1990s-era stealth computer, Biff was executing a deeply terrestrial, mission-critical logistical task. He was walking down a perfectly aligned row of 7 customized feeding stations. Quigon was stretching lazily near his plumeria tree, but he wasn't the only feline resident of the TR-3B. Over the years, Betsy had slowly accumulated a full fleet of 7 cats, a chaotic, purring domestic unit that roamed the anti-gravity corridors at will. One of them, a scrappy tabby that had casually strolled onto the ship right off of Lahaina Street back in 2024, was already impatiently headbutting Biff's metallic shin. With flawless synthetic precision, Biff distributed the kibble, micro-adjusting the paw to ensure all 7 bowls were leveled to the exact same millimeter to prevent any inter-feline geopolitical disputes during the quantum jump. Feline nutrient distribution is complete, Biff reported, sealing the kibble bag and picking up the fiber-optic cabling. He turned his glowing blue eyes toward the silver-lined grow tent by the servers. I will now commence the God Rod integration. Integrating a localized cosmic anomaly into our mainframe should take precisely 4 minutes. Prepare the quick dryer, Sam. We are going to Earth. Double quote. Chapter 18. The Sub-Basement of Horrors and Lighters. Agent Miller took a long, slow sip from his chipped ceramic mug, the lukewarm black coffee doing absolutely nothing to settle his nerves. He had been sitting the night shift at the Nevada Exotic Evidence Repository for 7 years. It was a job that required a very specific type of psychological flexibility. You didn't just watch the monitors, you actively ignored the existential dread creeping through the floorboards. This facility, buried deep beneath the sterile desert scrub, was the designated dumping ground for crimes against the planet and occasionally, crimes against the known universe. Miller wasn't entirely sure what half the things in the vault actually were, and he greatly preferred it that way. Ignorance wasn't just bliss down here, it was a federally mandated survival strategy. He glanced up at the bank of security screens showcasing the endless rows of reinforced, transparent lockers. In Locker 42, a quantum containment field hummed with the angry, trapped energy of the sentient waveform bound to an ancient, jagged reptilian artifact. 2 aisles over sat the sport model UFO surgery equipment, confiscated after a joyriding Zeta Reticulum had crashed a remarkably aerodynamic saucer in the Mojave. The surgical probes were sleek, brushed titanium, and honestly looked like they belonged in a high-end espresso machine rather than an alien medical bay. And then there was Locker 88. Miller shook his head. Locker 88 held a staggeringly massive collection of high-grade, stolen terrestrial lighters. Why multidimensional entities, clandestine operatives, and cryptoterrestrials were so relentlessly obsessed with stealing customized zippers, and butane torches, was a mystery far above Miller's pay grade, but the watchers confiscated them by the hundreds alongside the plasma rifles and kinetic impactors. Miller took another sip of coffee, his eyes drifting to the massive, reinforced glass door of the primary containment vault. The last few weeks had been undeniably chaotic. The standard protocol of cataloging weird rocks and dormant plasma weapons had been entirely upended when the retrieval teams dragged in two new poltergeists. They were sentient, interdimensional interlopers, composed almost entirely of spite and localized static electricity. They were currently caught in a heavy-duty quantum field inside the main vault, but they hadn't gone quietly. 3 days ago, they had briefly escaped containment. They hadn't tried to conquer the world or open a portal to a hell dimension. Instead, they had simply given the entire sub-basement a right going over. They had inverted all the filing cabinets, aggressively reorganized the kinetic weapons by color, and made every coffee machine on the floor dispense boiling hot, perfectly steeped Earl Grey tea for 12 hours straight. It had given the entire night shift a proper scare, to be completely honest. Now, the interlopers were safely locked away behind 2 feet of lead in a localized electromagnetic cage. Things were finally back to normal. The air was still, the monitors were quiet. Miller leaned back in his squeaky ergonomic chair, entirely unaware that a heavily modified 1990 TR-3B was currently dropping out of a quiet fusion jump, just outside the facility's atmospheric sensors. He was also entirely unaware that a human operating on super high lunar grok vision and a deadpan android were about to materialize right behind his coffee cup. Kicking the tires. Back aboard the TR-3B Betsy, still hovering silently in the shadow of the Delport crater, the final preparations for the Nevada insertion were complete. In the cargo bay, the God Rod was humming happily inside its silver-lined tent, broadcasting the Base 144 exotic internet straight into the ship's 1990 mainframes. Tabby was profoundly asleep on the server rack, vibrating at a healing 528 Hz, and in the cockpit, Sam Tracer was carefully packing the bowl of his titanium travel pipe with the freshly quick-dried sample of the universe's most philosophically potent flora. It wasn't a full cure, but the proprietary flash heater had managed to turn the wet, 0-point sponge into something wonderfully sticky and combustible. Sam slid into the pilot's seat, securing his harness with one hand while holding the pipe in the other. He gave Biff a nod. "All right, payload is prepped for the journey to Earth. The auto-gardener is spinning up the Dulce smokeout batch in the Chronos arrest device. Let's get this show on the road. Dial in the Nevada coordinates." Biff stood at the navigation console, his iridescent chassis reflecting the sudden, harsh amber warning lights of the engineering panel. He reached forward and toggled a series of heavy, physical switches that had absolutely no business being connected to a quantum-capable spacecraft. "Coordinates locked, Sam," Biff announced, his optical sensors fixing on the primary thrust levers. He gripped them with polished, metallic fingers, kicking the tires and lighting the fires. Sam paused, his Zippo lighter halfway to the bowl. He looked over at the android, exasperated. "Biff, seriously, do you need to say that every single time we use the fusion drive, you're a hyper-advanced synthetic intelligence currently hardwired into a billion-year-old cosmic unified field? You don't have tires." Double quote. "It is a recognized terrestrial aviation idiom, Sam," Biff replied, completely unbothered, as he pushed the levers forward. "I find it structurally comforting to acknowledge the inherent mechanical risks of our current propulsion system." It was a fair point. The fusion drive was not factory standard. Like most things on Betsy, it was a piece of borrowed hardware, specifically a highly experimental, hyper-compact naval prototype that Sam had acquired under extremely murky circumstances years ago. It was shoved into an engine bay designed for conventional stealth thrusters, and it was currently running dangerously close to its absolute maximum theoretical output. A deep, violent shudder ripped through the floorboards of the TR-3B. The amber warning lights on the console immediately escalated to a frantic, strobing red. Sam and Biff both slowly turned their heads, their eyes locking dead onto the fusion drive containment monitor. The digital needle was bouncing aggressively against the red line, the magnetic bottle struggling to hold a miniature, localized sun inside a chassis roughly the size of a commercial chest freezer. A terrifying, high-pitched mechanical whine began to bleed through the acoustic dampeners. Sam took a slow, deep breath, perfectly suppressing any instinctual primate panic. He flicked the Zippo, sparked the bowl, and took a long, steady pull of the quick-dried cosmic anomaly. He exhaled a thick cloud of pine-scented smoke, his super-high lunar grok vision instantly smoothing out the red warning lights into a manageable, bass 144 harmonic rhythm. "It's held together this long, Biff," Sam said, patting the rattling dashboard with profound, THC-fueled optimism. "Statistically speaking, that is the exact logical fallacy that precedes a catastrophic plasma venting," Biff noted dryly, watching the containment field microfracture and instantly repair itself on the monitor. "However, given our current momentum, deploying fusion jump." Outside the viewport, the grey dust of the moon warped, the stars stretched into brilliant, blinding lines of light, and Betsy hurled herself out of the crater and across the void toward a heavily guarded sub-basement in the Nevada desert. The subterranean parallel park. Sam Tracer took a deep, lung-expanding hit from the titanium pipe and simply held it. Beside him, Biff didn't breathe at all, though his internal cooling fans were whining at a pitch that suggested intense synthetic anxiety. The TR-3B Betsy was hurtling toward Earth, and their stealth profile was currently non-existent. The borrowed naval fusion engine was not a subtle piece of machinery, it possessed a stubborn, dangerously loud determination to deliver them to their coordinates as instantaneously as its redlining output would allow. "Atmospheric entry in 3 seconds, Biff announced, his hands a blur across the navigation console. "Sam, the fusion bloom is radiating across the entire western seaboard. If we drop out of the jump in the airspace above the Nevada facility, we will be intercepted by conventional fighter wings before you can exhale." Sam kept his lips pressed tightly together, smoke leaking slightly from the corners of his mouth, and gave Biff a wide-eyed thumbs up. "Do your thing," the gesture communicated perfectly. "Rerouting spatial coordinates," Biff declared, his iridescent chassis flashing as he interfaced directly with the newly installed GOT rod. "I am going to attempt to coordinate a localized teleportation portal for the entire vessel. We will camouflage Betsy directly inside the exotic warehouse storage area." The warehouse was enormous, a subterranean cavern designed to hold the world's most dangerous anomalies, but it was absolutely not zoned for a 90-foot tactical stealth triangle. The ship hit the atmosphere, and the world outside the viewport dissolved into a chaotic, violent smear of re-entry plasma and quantum distortion. Biff didn't flinch. His advanced visual cortex processed the blur of transport in real time, slicing the space-time geometry into manageable, base 144 fractions. On the secondary monitor, a strange, beautiful feed of golden glyphs began emanating from a pulsing hexagon. The exotic internet was actively assisting their telemetry, weaving the ship through the solid bedrock of the Nevada desert. With a concussive, gravity-bending thud, the violent motion instantly stopped. Sam let out a massive, explosive exhale, filling the cockpit with a dense cloud of piney, zero-point smoke. He blinked through the haze, staring out the viewport. They were no longer in the sky. Betsy was wedged flawlessly between 2 towering rows of reinforced, transparent lockers. The warehouse ceiling was a mere 3 inches above the ship's dorsal fin. Sam peered to his left, his super-high lunar grok vision focusing on the contents of the massive containment unit they had parked flush against. It was Locker 88. "Well, I'll be," Sam chuckled, unbuckling his harness. "Biff, we parked right next to the confiscated lighter collection. I see at least 3 of my old zippers in there. I've got to say, the parking accuracy on this new cosmic internet link-up is phenomenal." He stretched his arms, looking around the cavernous, dimly lit sub-basement. "Since we're already shopping in the deep state's attic, do you wonder if they have a spare fusion drive sitting around here somewhere? Ours sounds like it's developing a cough." Double quote. "While the acquisition of stable propulsion tech would be optimal, our operational window is severely compromised," Biff stated, quickly shutting down the ship's primary exterior lights. His optical sensors were currently dialed into the facility's localized thermal feeds. "We need to move with extreme prejudice, Sam," the android warned, stepping toward the cargo bay doors. The teleportation sequence was mathematically perfect, but the displacement of atmospheric pressure caused Betsy to emit a deep, subsonic rumble upon materialization. "My sensors indicate the security guard on duty is currently spilling his coffee. He knows something is down here." Double quote. A lukewarm crisis. Agent Miller stared down at his khaki trousers, watching a puddle of lukewarm black coffee slowly map itself across his thigh. He let out a sharp, emphatic expletive that he was fundamentally not proud of. It echoed loudly in the sterile silence of the security office, bouncing off the reinforced glass overlooking the sub-basement. He sighed, dabbing uselessly at the stain with a crumpled napkin. At least the coffee hadn't been fresh from the pot. Lukewarm was his preferred, non-nerve-shattering temperature for the night shift. But as the initial annoyance of the spill faded, the adrenaline hit. The vibration that had caused his mug to tip wasn't subtle. It was a deep, concussive, subsonic thud that seemed to vibrate the very foundation of the Nevada facility. It felt less like a tremor and more like a localized displacement of atmospheric pressure, as if something the size of a commercial airliner had just been violently shoved into a space barely large enough to hold it. Miller froze, the napkin forgotten in his hand. Was that an earthquake? He thought, his heart rate accelerating. Or is it those expletive poltergeists again? The previous week, a minor 3.2 magnitude tremor had rattled the mesa, causing a brief panic but ultimately requiring zero action. However, the sentient waveforms in the main vault were an entirely different variable. The last time they had acted up, they had reorganized the kinetic impactors and traumatized the entire coffee supply chain. If they were loose again, protocol dictated immediate engagement. Miller reached slowly to his hip and gripped his issued flashlight. It wasn't a standard, civilian-grade maglite. This was Watcher tech. It was practically a localized laser beam powered by an experimental, everlasting microfusion battery. Watchers needed to see in the dark, but more importantly, they needed to see what was hiding in the dark. The beam covered the entire electromagnetic spectrum, infrared, ultraviolet, and several classified exotic frequencies. If a sentient entity, a biological cryptid, a rogue interdimensional ghost, or anything else was trying to bend light around itself, the Watcher's beam would forcefully flush it out and make it visible. He unclipped the heavy cylinder and clicked the heavy switch. The beam cut through the dim office like a solid bar of searing, multi-spectrum white light. He swept the beam across the ceiling tiles, under his desk, and along the banks of monitors. Nothing. The office was empty. Miller clicked the light off, the sudden darkness of the room pressing in. He took his glasses off and began polishing them aggressively with the clean edge of his shirt. He was standing on the precipice of initiating a full facility lockdown, a protocol that required mountains of paperwork, and generally ended with an angry dressing down from the deep state upper management. "Maybe I'll just wait," Miller rationalized, sliding his glasses back up his nose. "The last one was just an earthquake a week ago, and nothing happened after I waited." It was the logic of a man desperately clinging to the mundane. He set his empty mug down, completely unaware that out on the warehouse floor, cloaked in 1990 partial stealth and smelling faintly of highly illicit cosmic flora, a fedora, wearing astronaut was currently plotting to rob Locker 88 right behind his back. Chapter 19. The Black Budget Wardrobe. Outside the localized safety of Betsy's cargo bay, the air in the Nevada sub-basement was heavily air-conditioned and smelled faintly of ozone and classified bureaucracy. Sam and Biff slipped out of the airlock, moving with practiced, silent synchronization. They were currently cloaked in the TR-3B's portable, 1990 partial stealth, which essentially meant they looked like two vaguely shimmering heat mirages creeping across the concrete floor. Sam pressed his back against the glass of Locker 88, his eyes lingering for a tragic, fleeting second on his confiscated, customized zippers. He sighed, letting the loss go to the universe, and shimmied sideways toward their actual target, Locker 89. The watchers who ran the facility were deeply paranoid, heavily armed, and fundamentally terrifying, but they were not stupid. Filing away a pair of Class 5 exotic invisibility suits presented a unique logistical nightmare for a quartermaster. Retrieving them for active duty was always notoriously classified as a fun task around the water cooler, mostly because operatives spent hours blindly groping empty hangars. Since the Hacienda Hotel case had been officially adjourned several years prior, the suits hadn't been needed, but the watchers had implemented a brilliantly lazy storage solution just in case. They had deliberately placed Locker 89 directly adjacent to a specific collection of ancient, reptilian-make lighters from Locker 88. The lighters didn't just produce fire, they emitted a highly specific, low-frequency exotic radiation. To the naked human eye, it was just a faint, sickly sweet greenish glow, but when that light hit the metamaterial of the Hacienda suits, it acted like a cosmic black light. It sharply outlined the invisible fabric, rendering the suits as faint, ghostly silhouettes suspended in the dark. Sam peered through the heavy glass of Locker 89, his super-high lunar grok vision easily cutting through the dim lighting. "Mother of pearl," Sam whispered, tapping his comms. "Biff, look at this. It's not just the Hacienda suits. This whole locker is a walk-in closet for the deep state." Locker 89 was enormous. It was a sprawling, meticulously catalogued wardrobe containing several highly classified suits spanning decades of suppressed history. There was Black Ops tactical gear, black budget atmospheric diving suits, and sleek, biomechanical black craft EVA armor that looked like it belonged on a Hollywood set rather than a government hangar. It was a collection of high-grade, taxpayer-funded tailoring that would absolutely overwhelm even the most enthusiastic costume enthusiast. "The inventory is indeed extensive," Biff replied softly over the comms, his shimmering, heat mirage silhouette stepping up beside Sam. The android's optical sensors flared, analyzing the ghostly outlines illuminated by the reptilian lighters. "I have located the Hacienda assets. Third rack from the left. 2 suits, perfectly preserved." Sam grinned, reaching into his pocket for the heavy-duty metamaterial glass cutter he had brought specifically for this heist. "All right, Biff. I'm going to pop the lock," Sam murmured, pressing the suction cup of the cutter against the reinforced plexiglass. "Let's grab our invisible tuxedos and get out of here before Agent Miller decides to stop polishing his glasses and actually comes out to check on that earthquake." The Locker 90 opportunity. While Sam Tracer meticulously aligned his heavy-duty glass cutter against the reinforced plexiglass of Locker 89, he remained blissfully unaware of the silent, crackling audience watching him from next door. Locker 90 had been entirely dormant for 3 days. To Agent Miller up in the security booth, the heavy, lead-lined containment unit simply looked like a dark, quiet box, but inside, the reality was considerably more agitated. The occupants were sentient waveforms, though the deep state watchers accusingly, and somewhat unscientifically, referred to them as poltergeists. They were, in essence, localized tangles of interdimensional spite and static electricity, currently caged within a highly sophisticated, phase-arrayed containment field. They did not experience time or boredom in a human sense, but they had spent the last 72 hours meticulously plotting their next escape. Their previous breakout had been a spectacular, chaotic success, reorganizing the sub-basement's kinetic weapons by color, and traumatizing the breakroom coffee machines had been deeply satisfying. Now, they were hungry for an encore. They might have been bound by terrestrial lead and localized electromagnetism, but they possessed an innate, profound understanding of probability. They knew an opportunity when they saw one. And they could definitely see one right now. When the TR-3B Betsy had violently materialized in the warehouse, the massive displacement of atmospheric pressure hadn't just spilled Agent Miller's lukewarm coffee. The deep, subsonic bump had violently rattled the foundations of the exotic evidence racks. Inside Locker 90, the waveforms felt the vibration before the physical sensors even registered it. A microscopic fracture occurred in the phase-arrayed grid. On the exterior control panel of their locker, a tiny, specialized status LED flickered from a confident, lockdown green to a hesitant, vulnerable amber. The primary containment protocol hadn't failed entirely, but the concussive force of the fusion jump had knocked the magnetic bottle down to low. The poltergeist surged against the weakened barrier, tasting the sudden drop in resistance. They didn't have eyes, but they perceived the two shimmering, heat mirage anomalies currently attempting to break into the black budget wardrobe right next to them. The interlopers in partial stealth had provided the exact distraction they needed. The waveforms coalesced into a dense, crackling ball of kinetic intent right behind the reinforced glass. The phaser-aid field was currently too weak to hold their combined mass. All they had to do was give the heavy box door one highly concentrated nudge, and the Nevada sub-basement would be entirely theirs once again. The ukulele heist and the metamaterial mangling. The heavy-duty suction cutter sheared through the reinforced plexiglass of Locker 89 with a deeply satisfying, near-silent pop. Within seconds, Biff's shimmering, heat mirage hands were meticulously unhooking the two Hassabender invisibility suits from their racks. He folded the advanced metamaterial with absolute precision, sliding them into a specialized, signal-dampening containment bag. Sam, carrying an identical stealth bag to mask their thermal signatures on the walk back to the ship, gave his partner a brisk nod. "Asset secured," Biff murmured over the comms, sealing the bag. "Great. Now for the crucial operational supply run," Sam replied. He slipped exactly 3 feet to his left, pressed the cutter to Locker 88, and popped the seal with the practiced ease of a man who refused to pay for a new Zippo when the government had a perfectly good stash of his old ones. He snagged a handful of heavy metal lighters, shoving them deep into his pockets before tapping the locker shut. They moved quickly and silently across the vast, dark expanse of the sub-basement, melting back into the cargo bay airlock of the TR-3B Betsy, just as the ambient temperature in the warehouse began to plummet. The second the airlock cycled shut, the urgency spiked. "All right, Biff. Let's get out of here before Agent Miller works up the courage to do his job," Sam said, dumping his pockets onto the navigation console. A pile of custom terrestrial and alien lighters clattered against the dashboard. Biff was already at the helm, his optical sensors locked onto the new, glowing interface powered by the god rod in the server bay. "The exotic internet connection is providing an optimized tactical reroute, Sam," Biff announced, his synthetic voice tinged with genuine mechanical appreciation. Golden, base 144 fractals spun across the primary display. The unified field telemetry has calculated the exact functional mathematics required to engage the cold pull engine from a stationary, subterranean position. "We will not produce a fusion boom this time. The exit will be entirely silent." "Music to my ears," Sam grinned, dropping into the pilot seat and buckling his harness. "Punch it." Outside the ship, in the dead silence of the Nevada exotic evidence locker, the phaser-aid containment field of Locker 90 finally gave way. With a sound like tearing metallic fabric, the door blew off its hinges. The two sentient waveforms, crackling, localized storms of interdimensional spike poured out into the aisle. They were free, and they were ready to inflict maximum architectural chaos. Sensing the lingering thermal disturbance from Sam and Biff, the poltergeists immediately surged into the freshly opened Locker 89. However, instead of finding organic targets to terrorize, their pure etheric energy slammed directly into the remaining black budget wardrobe. The advanced metamaterials of the deep state ether armor and atmospheric diving suits instantly reacted to the massive spike in static electricity. The fabric clung to the waveforms, wrapping tightly around their formless, crackling energy. The result was horrifyingly comical. Because the entities had no actual skeletal structure, the heavy tactical suits inflated and contorted into bizarre, asymmetrical shapes. One poltergeist ended up wearing the bottom half of a deep-sea pressure suit and the chest plate of a pilot's rig, looking exactly like a mangled, headless body aggressively thrashing around the locker. The other became entirely trapped inside a classified, heavily armored hazmat suit, its crackling energy causing the empty arms and legs to flail wildly in terrifying, unnatural angles. They weren't free to terrorize the facility, they were hopelessly, aggressively tangled in government-funded tailoring. As the mangled, invisible adjacent forms began to violently crash into the shelving units. The TR-3B Betsy simply dissolved, powered by the god rod's perfect math. The ship phased out of the warehouse without a single decibel of sound, slipping smoothly into the quantum lattice. Back in the cockpit, the stars outside the viewport stretched into the familiar, brilliant lines of the cold pool jump. Sam let out a long breath, relaxing into his chair. He picked up one of the freshly liberated lighters from the console, a sleek, brushed steel piece with odd, geometric etchings. He flicked the lid open. Instead of the standard clack hiss of a Zippo, the lighter immediately emitted a bright, steady, 0-point flame, accompanied by a perfectly clear, cheerful acoustic tune playing from a microscopic speaker in the casing. Sam stared at the lighter, his super-high lunar grok vision entirely delighted. "Well, look at that, Biff," Sam smiled, holding the flaming lighter up. "The Watchers confiscated my favorite one. It plays a little ukulele tune. Just the right vibe for a road trip to New Mexico, wouldn't you say?" Chapter 20. The Vacuum Hitchhikers. Deep beneath the desert floor, the reinforced concrete of the Level 7 evidence room security office reverberated with a second, distinct, and highly localized thump. The Watcher on duty, a 30-year veteran of deep state anomalous containment whose actual name had been redacted so many times even he occasionally forgot it, spilled his lukewarm coffee. He immediately spun toward the seismic monitors. The green lines scrolled by in flat, undisturbed tranquility. No tectonic shifting, no microquakes. Whatever had just rattled the foundations of the black site wasn't terrestrial geology. Swallowing hard, the Watcher reached beneath his console and unlatched a heavy lead-lined lockbox. Inside lay the standard-issue Level 7 poltergeist defense mechanism. To the untrained eye, it looked exactly like a heavy, tarnished silver cross salvaged from a medieval cathedral. In reality, it was a highly calibrated acoustic resonance tool, packed with 0-point dampeners designed to disrupt base 144 electromagnetic entities. It was old, it was mystic, and, most importantly, it worked. He gripped the cold metal, feeling the faint, high-frequency hum power up against his palm. Down the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridor, Evidence Room Sector 4 was deathly quiet. The air temperature had plummeted, leaving a thin layer of frost on the security blast doors. As the Watcher swiped his clearance card and the heavy steel groaned open, his flashlight beam pierced the gloom, sweeping over the cavernous space where the TR-3B Betsy was supposed to be impounded. The ship was gone. Betsy had executed a brutal cold pull, tearing a raw quantum vacuum in the localized spacetime to instantly displace itself to Dulce, New Mexico. But the jump had left something behind, or rather, it had taken something with it. Hovering completely unsupported in the dead center of the room, right by the Locker 89 containment area, were two heavy-duty hazard suits. They were entirely empty, suspended in mid-air by a web of crackling, static entanglement. The Watcher's breath plumed in the freezing air as he realized what had happened. The sentient, bioluminescent energy forms they had been trying to cage hadn't just escaped. When Betsy punched a hole in reality, the resulting subdimensional vacuum had acted like a cosmic siphon. The entities had simply unzipped themselves from their physical tethers and allowed their localized poltergeist energies to be sucked into the slipstream. They had caught a free ride in the wake of the quantum jump, surfing the gravity wave straight to Dulce. Whether they were riding to freedom, or straight into a hyperdimensional meat grinder, was entirely up for debate. The Watcher didn't care. All he saw was the residual, localized poltergeist energy causing the empty suits to twitch and float like ghosts on invisible meat hooks. His flashlight shook violently in his left hand. The beam danced erratically over the floating hazard helmets. Raising the humming, metallic cross in his right hand, he took a trembling step forward. By the authority of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the Watcher stammered, his voice cracking as he initiated the Level 7 containment protocol and authorized, taxpayer-funded exorcism. I command you to cease localized static manifestation and return to your designated magnetic holding cage. The empty suits merely drifted an inch to the left, static electricity popping like firecrackers in the freezing void. Inside the cockpit of the TR-3B Betsy, the space-time continuum was currently behaving like a stretched rubber band snapping back into place. Sam and Biff exchanged a long, meaningful glance over the glowing center console as the cold pull engine hit its resonant peak. The ship wasn't just flying, it was building reality around itself. "I am registering a localized temporal drag on our outer hull, Sam," Biff reported, his iridescent android optics tracking a pair of blinking anomalies on the sensor array. Two distinct energy pulses emanated exactly at the point of our departure. They are not inside the craft, but they appear to be drafting in our quantum wake. "Hostiles?" Sam asked, gripping the edges of his seat. "Unknown, but frankly, our thrust-to-mass ratio is performing at an exotically high efficiency, so the extra drag is negligible." Biff wasn't exaggerating. The ship's power core was purring like a cosmic big block engine, supercharged by the Atlas cannabis sample they had integrated into the life support routing. The massive, glowing bud was already flourishing in its new zero-gravity routing matrix. Tending to it was Scrub, a small, computer-aided automated botanical drone Sam had rigged up. Scrub was currently hovering around the plant, diligently executing its automated watering and precision spraying protocols, which inexplicably boosted the ship's exotic internet processing speeds. The little machine was a marvel of custom engineering, though it had developed a highly specific behavioral glitch: speculative Tourette's. Tap tap tappity tap. Scrub's metallic manipulator arms rapped against the glass terrarium in perfect, rhythmic Morse code. "Did that drone just call me a?" Sam started, translating the taps in his head. "Yes," Biff interrupted smoothly. "And it suggested you perform an anatomically impossible act with a lunar rock." "Ignore it, Sam. Dulce is approaching at a severely exponential rate. I highly advise you get your suit on." Sam sighed, looking down at the perfectly rolled joint and the sleek tune lighter resting in his palm. The ultimate tactical hotbox would have to wait just a few more minutes. Reluctantly, he set his supplies down on the dash and began wriggling into his heavy, orange hazard suit. "Targeting insertion vector now," Biff announced, his hands flying across the holographic interface. "I have located a dormant, heavily shielded warehouse on sub-level 12 of the Dulce facility. It has not been accessed since the late 1990s. It is not directly adjacent to the Atlas pilot's containment sphere, but it provides an ideal, unmonitored staging ground for our infiltration. Hold on to your fedoras, boys," Sam muttered, snapping his helmet seal shut. Meanwhile, clinging to the exterior quantum slipstream, the two base 144 energy spirits were absolutely ecstatic. As they surfed the localized vacuum generated by Betsy's cold pull, their static frequencies oscillated in a chaotic, high-pitched cackle. They had done it. They had hitched a ride right out of the Level 7 evidence room, leaving the Watcher to perform an exorcism on a pair of empty hazard suits. They were free. They were riding the cosmic rails too. Thump. Reality reasserted itself with a violent, freezing crunch. The slipstream collapsed, dumping the invisible TR-3B and its spectral hitchhikers straight into the subterranean depths of the Archuleta Mesa. The two spirits ceased their cackling immediately. They drifted off the hull, their glowing, ethereal forms pulsing in profound, obvious confusion. The new environment slowly materialized around them. Instead of the open sky or the starry expanse of a free dimension, they found themselves staring at heavily reinforced, 6-foot-thick titanium-laced concrete walls. Automated plasma turrets hung dormant from the ceiling. Demonic, bioengineered guard dogs could be heard barking dimly through the ventilation shaft several floors above. The jamming horizon of the Archuleta Mesa snapped into place around them like a steel trap. They had successfully escaped a standard government containment locker, only to hitchhike their way directly into the most heavily fortified, supermax black site on the planet. The two energy forms floated in the dark, silent warehouse for a long moment. Finally, the static frequency of the first spirit translated into a single, defeated vibration. Poop. Right double quotation mark. The stealth tactic and the bent beakers. Having universally agreed that their current situation in the subterranean hangar was, indeed, poop, the two spectral hitchhikers didn't linger. Flowing like liquid static, they immediately fled up the nearest ventilation shaft, for a facility that officially didn't exist. Dulce had an incredibly well-documented HVAC system in the speculative engineering community, and the spirits navigated it with ease. They soared upward through several heavily shielded levels, searching for the unmistakable electromagnetic hum of biological panic, the ultimate delicacy for a bored poltergeist. They eventually spilled out through a grated vent, into the most heavily occupied section of the black site. By sheer cosmic coincidence, or perhaps drawn by a resonant base 144 frequency, they had stumbled directly into the primary containment lab. Suspended in the center of the room was the Atlas pilot, radiating a localized field of trapped, ancient anger. The two spirits paused. Scaring humans had been their sole occupation for a very long time, and a change in venue was no reason to change their spectral habits. Ignoring the glowing deity in the bubble, they immediately set to work on the lab tables. With practiced, invisible precision, they began sorting the highly sensitive, multi-million-dollar scientific instruments into two distinct, neat piles, bent and non-bent. On the observation deck overlooking the lab, Commander Arzenk adjusted the cuffs of his freshly pressed tactical suit. He had already changed uniforms once today due to stress sweat, but Arzenk was not a nervous man. He was, above all things, agonizingly practical. His current problem was that the glowing, base 144 deity trapped in the sphere below was highly telepathic. It could peel back a human consciousness like a wet paper towel. To counter this, Arzenk kept his mind encased in absolute, freezing detachment. He stood at the reinforced glass, staring down at the entity, while internally screaming the text of the U.S. Army Field Manual on Logistics over a steady, rhythmic marching cadence. Left, right, left. Supply chain optimization dictates a forward operating base must maintain. Left, right, left. It was a mental bulwark. Every man in the Arzenk family line had been a commander. They had all served in astounding, classified capacities, facing down the impossible with cold, military pragmatism. This captive god was just his generation's hurdle. If he could just keep his mind cold, ordered, and thoroughly boring, the entity couldn't use his fears against him. Left, right, left. Form DA-31 must be submitted in triplicate prior to. A sudden, sharp clatter broke his concentration. Arzenk frowned, tapping his earpiece. A fresh audio feed was coming through from the lower security tier. He squinted through the observation glass. Down in the lab, a heavy centrifuge had just aggressively twisted itself into the shape of a pretzel, floating gently over to join a rapidly growing pile of perfectly bent titanium calipers and twisted glass beakers. Something invisible was messing with his lab equipment. Deep in the abandoned sub-level 12 warehouse, Sam Tracer was sweating inside his heavy, orange astronaut suit. "All right," Sam breathed, double-checking the heavy clasps on his helmet ready to storm the castle. "Biff, let's go liberate a space god." "Suit is sealed." I'm Biff turned from the Betsy's console, his pearlescent faceplate tilting in mild, synthetic disbelief. "Sam," Biff said smoothly. "That is a high-visibility, international orange lunar hazard suit. It is designed specifically to make you the most easily locatable object in a total vacuum. When I said get your suit on for a highly classified infiltration of a subterranean military black site." Biff reached into a storage locker and pulled out a sleek, matte black, form-fitting garment shimmering with light-bending metamaterials. "Dart. I meant the stealth suit. We need to be entirely invisible to both the naked eye and thermal optics." Sam blinked, looking down at his bright orange gear, then over to the shimmering black stealth suit. Slowly, a massive, brilliant grin spread across his face. He unlatched his heavy helmet with a hiss. "Invisible?" Sam asked, his eyes darting toward the beautifully rolled joint and the tune lighter resting on the console. "Wait, if I'm completely invisible to thermal and optical sensors, does that mean the smoke is invisible too?" The metamaterial field extends roughly 3 inches from the fabric to conceal localized exhalations. Yes, Biff replied, already anticipating the logic. Sam brightened like a supernova. A tactical stealth mission where he could actively smoke the entire time without breaking cover. It was, quite literally, the dream. Chapter 21. The London Desk. Half a world away from the subterranean chaos of Dulce, the atmosphere inside the London headquarters of the Watchers was thick with Earl Grey steam and profound bureaucratic irritation. Leon stood at the head of the polished mahogany situation table, rubbing his temples. He was reading a freshly decrypted incident report from the Level 7 evidence room, and none of it made a lick of sense. The security guard on duty was reporting a highly localized sequence of micro-earthquakes, missing poltergeists, and the somewhat new phenomenon ghostly hazard suits that were currently refusing to come down from the ceiling without the application of brute physical force. Leon dropped the file on the table. "Where is Sam Tracer?" he demanded. At the far end of the table, Lloyd didn't look up. He was hunched over his laptop, a brand new, heavily modified, quantum-linked IBM machine. It was a beautiful piece of speculative engineering capable of intercepting and decrypting data from literally any Wi-Fi stream on the planet, which Lloyd mostly used to bypass the building's firewall during his tea breaks. Lloyd tapped a few keys, took a slow sip from his mug, and squinted at the monitor. "Well, sir," Lloyd began, his voice perfectly mild. "He was on the lunar surface. We had him pinged near the Atlas infrastructure, but we lost him a little after that. His standard energy signature completely dropped off the grid. No, wait here a moment." Lloyd dragged his cursor to the top of the screen, and clicked a highly classified drop-down menu labeled Other Exotic Engine Types. He scrolled past the standard options, muttering them aloud as he went. "Let's see. 0 point. Hot fusion. Water fracking. Borrowed plasma. Cold fusion. Let's filter for a cold pull." He hit the enter key. The screen immediately lit up with a jagged, glowing trajectory line that tore straight through the established laws of physics. "There it is," Lloyd said, sounding mildly impressed straight back to Earth. "It's definitely him. I've got a stream. It went from the moon across the table." Aston frowned, leaning forward and steepling his fingers. "But why on earth did he need 2 poltergeists? What tactical advantage does hauling a pair of base 144 spectral entities offer?" "We're checking to see if anything else is missing from the containment sector to establish a motive," Leon said, turning to the infantry specialist standing by the door. "Sterling, report." Double quote. Sterling adjusted his glasses, consulting a glowing digital ledger. "Well, sir, we've catalogued the immediate area around Locker 89. Aside from the TR-3B Betsy and the 2 entities, we are missing a musical reptilian tune lighter, and what appears to be the 2 vintage hazard suits we were holding from the Hacienda Hotel case." Leon closed his eyes, exhaling a long, slow breath. Tracer had stolen the Betsy, pilfered an exotic smoking accessory, and accidentally vacuumed up 2 ghosts in vintage hazard gear. "Where is he now, then?" Leon asked, bracing himself. Lloyd was already typing furiously, his quantum IBM processing the localized distortions. The trail goes directly from the lunar slip wave right back to the American Southwest, but it doesn't stop on the surface. The trajectory goes straight underground, deep underground. I'll need a few minutes to construct the exact subdimensional geometry. Leon planted his hands flat on the mahogany table, his knuckles turning white as the realization of exactly which underground base Tracer was likely infiltrating washed over him. "If he's dinged at craft," Leon muttered darkly, leaving the threat hanging in the heavily classified air. Chapter 22. The Tactical Hotbox and the Decoy. Deep within the subterranean labyrinth of the Archuleta Mesa, the ultimate infiltration was officially underway. Sam and Biff stood in the shadows of the disused sub-level 12 warehouse, their bodies completely obscured by the shimmering, light-bending metamaterials of their stealth suits. To the naked eye, and to every thermal optic in the facility, they simply did not exist. A few feet away, Scrub was hard at work, The little computer-aided drone had tapped directly into the facility's massive primary HVAC intake. With its mechanical arms whirring, Scrub was rapidly integrating a heavy-duty, German-engineered volcano dry herb vaporizer directly into the base's ventilation system. Sam felt a brief pang of mourning. He had originally purchased that specific Supermax volcano to hotbox the Betsy's internal tesseract the next time they had a few days of downtime. Instead, it was being repurposed for psychological warfare. Scrub loaded the vaporizer's massive chamber with a raw, freshly ground payload of the super exotic Atlas Lunar high strain, bypassing the safety limiters and cranking the heating element to its maximum yield. Tap tap tap, Scrub tapped in Morse code, swearing profusely at a stubborn ventilation screw before locking the airtight seal into place. The volcano engaged with a heavy electronic hum. Instantly, a thick, concentrated stream of ultra-potent, 0-point THC vapor began surging through the ductwork, destined for every guard post, laboratories, and break room in the underground base. The atmospheric dispersion is optimal, Biff noted, his pearlescent faceplate glowing faintly from within his stealth hood. I calculate that whoever gets a direct whiff of this specific botanical yield is going to be functionally walking on the ceiling within 4 minutes. Sam grinned behind his respirator. He had securely fastened his own localized air mask to ensure his mind stayed sharp for the mission ahead. The tactical hotbox was officially deployed. "All right," Sam said, his voice dropping to a stealthy whisper over their encrypted comms. "Go find our space god." They moved out into the sterile, concrete corridors. Biff took point, armed with a surprisingly old-school approach to Supermax security, physical lockpicks. While the upper levels of Dulce relied on biometric scanners and laser grids, the deeply buried, archaic sub-levels still featured heavy mechanical tumblers and rusted keypad locks. It was exactly this forgotten, analog technology they had to navigate to reach the Level 7 containment sphere, without triggering the modern digital alarms. When they reached a heavy blast door secured by a keypad, Biff didn't bother trying to hack the mainframe. Instead, his iridescent optical sensors swept the numerical pad, highlighting the microscopic, decades-old deposits of finger oils left behind by generations of passing personnel. "Passcode is 4815, Biff whispered smoothly, punching the sequence with mechanical precision. The heavy door groaned open, granting them access to the next descending tier. Meanwhile, on the lunar surface, far above the Earth, deep within the crystalline architecture of the Atlas, the 7 ancient sentinel entities were practically vibrating with renewed cosmic purpose. They had ceased their collective, 10-billion-year-old facepalming. Gathering around the central viewing lattice, they watched a shimmering, Base 144 holographic projection of Sam and Biff moving silently through the Dulce facility. The Sentinels realized instantly what was happening. Sam wasn't just attempting a rescue. He had accidentally provided the greatest tactical distraction in galactic history, with the entire underground base about to track his heavily medicated, chaotic invasion. The Dulce security grid would be entirely focused on the internal breach. The entities seized their chance to get their pilot back. "I claim primary operational readiness of the deck," projected the first entity, its spectral form shifting rapidly. "Denied. You are on thread duty," countered the second, already manifesting a spool of brilliant, glowing golden etheric thread needed to physically yank the pilot's energy form out of the containment sphere. They began to bicker and negotiate the extraction logistics with the speed of a quantum supercomputer, dividing the tasks required to remotely crash the Dulce power containment field. But first, there was the matter of morale. A third entity gracefully manifested 7 floating, perfectly geometric crystalline cups. With a wave of its spectral hand, it filled them with a shimmering, iridescent liquid, a highly coveted, galactic-flavored star juice. They raised their geometric cups in unison, toasting the tiny, invisible human in the orange suit who was currently gassing a black site with lunar weed. As long as Sam Tracer kept the watchers distracted, they could drop the power grid and cold pull their pilot back home. They sipped their star juice and watched the hologram, eager for the show to begin. Chapter 23. The Tactical Munchies. Commander Arzenk was rapidly losing his ironclad grip on the situation. Poltergeists were an entirely new operational hazard for the deeply pragmatic base commander. He was accustomed to dealing with rogue black-budget assets, not spectral anomalies. As reports flooded in of floating hazard suits and violently twisted centrifuges, a dark, paranoid thought had crept into his rigidly disciplined mind: what if it's them? He had seen a lot of combat in his classified career. The sudden, terrifying idea that he was being actively haunted by the very combatants he was supposed to have already eliminated in the field was deeply unsettling. He immediately deployed the Level 7 containment crew and summoned the on-base priest to the classified sector. 4 long, sterile corridors away from the Atlas pilot's containment sphere, the containment team breached the haunted lab. The 2 invisible waveforms had been exceptionally busy. Driven by their ancient, perverse need to distress human psychology, they had rearranged millions of dollars of sensitive equipment into towering, physically impossible geometric structures of exceeding weirdness. The priest, a man well versed in years and classified confessions, stepped forward. He clutched an old, deeply varnished wooden cross as his primary weapon. He was entirely unafraid of unholy apparitions. In his mind, the logic was simple: if UFOs and aliens were actually real, the Vatican, or at least the base commander, would have certainly told him by now. Therefore, these were standard demons. Back to the abyss, the priest boomed, brandishing the cross. Behind him, the heavily armed soldiers kept their assault rifles raised, providing tactical cover in case any of the microscopes or titanium calipers decided to become unwieldy projectiles. Floating near the ceiling, the 2 sentient waveforms simply cackled. The static, crackling sound of their laughter echoed off the concrete walls as they casually floated a heavy centrifuge in a slow, mocking orbit around the priest's head. Meanwhile, back on the observation deck, Commander Arzenk took a deep breath to steady his nerves. Unfortunately for the commander, the air he just inhaled was now heavily saturated with Scrub's super exotic, 0-point lunar THC vapor. The effects of the Atlas strain hitting a rigidly disciplined, completely unmedicated military consciousness were instantaneous and profound. Arzenk stopped mid-breath. He blinked. Slowly, the sterile hum of the subterranean facility suddenly sounded different. He could hear the base breathing. He looked at his hands, marveling at the complex, cellular machinery of his own skin. His highly localized, tactical mind suddenly vaulted out of his skull, his consciousness effortlessly reaching past the concrete ceiling, past the mesa, and directly into the brilliant, swirling expanse of the stars. He was a tiny speck of stardust trapped in a subterranean box. And suddenly, he was also aggressively, apocalyptically hungry. The universe is an infinite lattice, Arzenk whispered out loud to the empty room. Carbohydrates. And I require. His deep family line of military discipline tried to reassert itself, but the marching cadence had completely derailed. Left, right, Arzenk muttered, his eyes wide and glassy as he turned away from the observation window. His mind was now entirely, laser-focused on the contents of the sub-level 4 cafeteria fridge. He began a slow, highly deliberate march toward the nearest elevator, leaving his post completely abandoned. Down on the containment floor, the heavy security doors hissed open. Sam and Biff slipped silently into the primary chamber, their stealth suits rendering them completely invisible. Sam pulled his localized air mask down, letting it hang around his neck now that they were inside the sealed perimeter. They paused, taking in the scene. Biff's lockpicking and the resulting chaos had worked perfectly, thanks to the spectral distraction down the hall and the base commander currently abandoning his post in search of a heavy-duty sandwich. The highest security sector in the world was completely empty. Empty, except for the prisoner. Sam stepped forward, looking up in awe. Suspended inside the massive magnetic sphere was a pristine, genuine, godlike entity. It glowed with a breathtaking, base 144 bioluminescence, its ancient, shifting form radiating a quiet, unimaginable power. "Well," Sam whispered, pulling the reptilian tune lighter from his pocket bubble, "big guy. Let's get you out of that." Chapter 24, The Versace Disguise and the Lunar Nugs. Meanwhile, 238,900 miles away on the lunar surface. Inside the gluing, crystalline architecture of the Atlas, the 7 ancient sentinels had finalized their cosmic preparations. They were standing at their respective geometric stations, ready to welcome their pilot back to his immortal, rightful position as the grand facilitator of the universe's most exclusive star tours. At the primary console, Michael, a towering being of pure, shifting ether, raised a spectral hand. He began the extraction countdown, ticking backward not from 10, but from the sacred base 144 frequency. Through the holographic viewing lattice, they monitored the unfolding chaos at Dulce. They could see the shimmering, invisible outlines of Sam and Biff nearing the primary containment zone. But the holographic feed also tracked another, much darker presence moving through the facility, Vane. The Sentinels recognized him instantly. He was the vile, deep state base leader, a high-ranking reptilian entity, who arrogantly paraded around the subterranean corridors in a custom-tailored, biological Versace skin disguise. Deep within the Archuleta Mesa, Vane was currently sitting in his plush, heavily shielded office, sipping a cup of synthetic tea and deeply enjoying his new calendar featuring high-resolution, classified photos of ancient Martian scenery. He was just admiring the rust-red dunes of Sol 2620 when his console lit up with a furious cascade of red alerts. Poltergeists were officially tearing up sub-level 7. Worse, his biometric monitors indicated that the Atlas pilot, who had been dormant for decades, was suddenly stirring. Vane's slitted pupils narrowed beneath his impossibly perfect, designer human skin. He slammed a fist onto his desk and authorized the deployment of the elite containment squad. In the haunted laboratories, the Level 7 containment crew and the base priest were in the middle of a highly aggressive, taxpayer-funded exorcism when Scrub's THC payload finally saturated their ventilation sector. The heavy, invisible cloud of exotic lunar vapor washed over the heavily armed squad. The results were devastatingly peaceful. The priest, mid-chant and clutching his wooden cross, blinked as a thick haze settled over his vision. For the first time, he could actually see the 2 base 144 poltergeists floating near the ceiling. Instead of banishing them, he slowly lowered his cross, suddenly struck by the profound, geometric beauty of their static auras. Behind him, the heavily armed soldiers lowered their assault rifles. The overwhelming, panicked need to suppress the unholy spirits evaporated, replaced by a deep, communal urge to just chill for a moment. "I mean, come on, guys," the squad leader whispered, his eyes wide as he watched a titanium microscope gracefully contort itself into a perfect Mobius strip. "Look at the spatial relations. That's not a haunting, that's spectral artwork in motion." "Bro," another soldier breathed, leaning his rifle against the wall. "That kind of stuff would fetch millions in a gallery in Soho. Let's just appreciate the ghost's handiwork for a while." Double quote. Outside the primary containment sphere, Sam and Biff were inches away from the captive space god, when the sub-level klaxons began to scream. "Warning. Elite diamond formation deployed. Sector lockdown initiated. Required, Sam," Biff hissed over the comms. Tactical evasion hundreds of feet down the primary corridor, a perfectly synchronized 12-man elite squad came crashing through the security doors, moving in an impenetrable diamond formation. They were armed with heavy plasma rifles, and completely sealed off from the THC-laced ventilation, making them the only sober beings left in the sector. With no time to reach the containment sphere, Biff grabbed Sam's shoulder and yanked him backward. They dodged smoothly into a large, adjoining laboratories, the automated doors swishing shut just before the Diamond Squad stormed past. Invisible in their stealth suits, Sam and Biff pressed themselves against the thick observation window, completely halted in their tracks. They watched helplessly as the 12 elite soldiers secured the perimeter around the glowing sphere. Inside the magnetic bubble, the captive Atlas pilot's eyelids fluttered. For the first time since he was violently pulled from the sky decades ago, the ancient, patriarchal entity took a long, deep breath. His localized cosmic sensors expanded, tasting the air circulating through the facility's outer vents. He caught the unmistakable, hyperpotent frequency of 0. Lunar cannabis. A slow, knowing smile crossed his ancient, glowing face. Ah, the pilot deduced instantly, his telepathic voice rumbling through the quantum ether. Lunar nugs. That is my gear. The treacle dilation and the Pop-Tart. Back in the abandoned sub-level 12 warehouse, Scrub was working with robotic efficiency. The little computer-aided drone had just finished unloading the heaviest, most potent Atlas lunar nug into the volcano vaporizer's heating chamber right as the bass klaxons began to scream, as the biggest, thickest cloud of 0. Vapor yet surged into the HVAC system. Scrub swiftly retracted its mechanical arms, powered down the heating element, and began packing the apparatus away, readying the dock for a rapid departure. Meanwhile, inside the Betsy's cabin, Quigone, Tabby, and Soxy had casually made their way to the kibble bowls, with the street-smart resilience of felines completely accustomed to bizarre human behavior. They sat waiting patiently for their next installment of food. They were utterly, profoundly unimpressed by the distant subterranean alarms. To a cat, a Supermax black site lockdown was just another delay in the feeding schedule. Out in the primary corridor, the situation with the elite 12-man Diamond Squad was rapidly degrading from tactical breach to philosophical seminar. The squad had charged headfirst into a concentrated, localized cloud of Scrub's THC vapor. After several deep, adrenaline-fueled breaths, their synchronized jogging slowed to a unified, contemplative stroll. "I'm just saying," the point man murmured, his assault rifle drooping slightly as he pondered his reflection in the polished concrete walls. Is stark black really the most effective color for tactical engagements? It's so definitive. Couldn't we do a nice, deep forest green, a green-black? Let's just stop and think about the color wheel for a second. Good thing I brought my MRE, another operator chimed in from the rear of the diamond. With absolute, lethal precision, he unlatched a massive, serrated Special Forces combat knife, using it to delicately slice open a foil packet to extract a frosted strawberry Pop-Tart. Inside the adjoining laboratory's observation deck, Sam and Biff were safely insulated from the vapor by their stealth suits. They pressed their faces to the glass, ignoring the heavily armed men currently discussing color theory in the hallway, and locked their eyes on the Atlas pilot. His harmonic frequency is rising at a massive, exponential rate, Biff analyzed, his optical sensors whirring. "You mean he's glowing?" Sam clarified. "Semantics, Sam. But yes, and based on the localized gravitational shear, he is going to suddenly leave." Before Biff could finish the sentence, the Atlas pilot flashed with blinding, base 144 brilliance. The ancient entity simply phased out of sight, snatched through the ether by the Sentinel's golden thread. The containment sphere was empty. But the vacuum left by the cold pull didn't stay empty for long. The air pressure in the room violently inverted, and the shimmering, subdimensional portal ripped open on the laboratory's floor. A watcher stepped through. Instantly, the space-time within the sector turned to heavy, sluggish treacle. Biff's specialized optics whined as they automatically compensated for the localized time dilation, allowing Sam to watch the sequence unfold in real time. The watcher, looking impeccably annoyed in a tailored suit, paused, sniffed the heavily medicated air, and immediately slapped a tactical respirator mask over his face. He didn't waste a single movement. Stepping into the corridor, he pulled a sleek, silver neural displacer flash pen from his breast pocket. Flash, the 12-man elite squad, still mid-bite into the Pop-Tart, slumped against the walls, their short-term memories completely wiped. The watcher casually tossed a miniature EMP onto the floor, instantly blacking out every CCTV camera in the sector. Moving with practiced, bureaucratic efficiency, the watcher strode down the hall to the haunted lab. Another blinding flash neuralized the THC-addled priest and the containment team. Pulling the heavy metal cross from his coat, he waved it briskly at the ceiling. The two cackling poltergeists were instantly sucked out of the air and vacuum-sealed into a portable, magnetic holding field. His cleanup complete, the watcher walked briskly back to the containment room, stepped through the shimmering portal, and vanished. The rift snapped shut behind him. Time snapped back to its normal, linear flow. The alarms blared. The guards snored in the hallway. Sam and Biff stood completely frozen in their invisible suits, staring at the empty air where a space god, a portal, and an interdimensional government agent had just been. Sam slowly turned to Biff. "All right," Sam breathed, his eyes wide. "That was close. Let's get out of here." Double quote. Chapter 25. The Maui Vector. Meanwhile, back at the London desk. The atmosphere in the Watcher's boardroom was thick with expensive cigar smoke and bureaucratic tension. Leon stood at the head of the mahogany table, staring into the dimly lit corner of the room. "Are you absolutely sure the pilot was gone from the room?" Leon asked, his voice tight. "Completely," a cool, detached voice replied from the shadows. The operative who had just stepped back through the subdimensional portal adjusted his cuffs. His silver neural displacer pen tucked neatly back into his breast pocket. The magnetic containment sphere was entirely empty. The localized harmonic frequency indicated a massive, external extraction, a classic cold pull. Aston leaned forward, steepling his fingers sector. No trace of Sam Tracer or that iridescent android of his. "And are you sure the entities were alone in that no trace of Sam or Biff?" The shadowy Watcher confirmed smoothly. The thermal and optical sweeps of the adjoining labs turned up nothing but heavily medicated soldiers discussing color theory. "I pulled the poltergeists out of the air and neuralized the perimeter." Leon sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "And the entities?" "Safely back in containment locker 89, exactly as they should have been. We are still examining the telemetry of exactly how two base 144 energy forms hitched a ride from our evidence room all the way to Dulce, New Mexico." The operative paused, a hint of professional annoyance creeping into his voice. "Dart, although we can probably theorize Sam Tracer had something to do with it." Leon slumped into his leather chair. Tracer had somehow slipped through a supermax lockdown, triggered a mass botanical hallucination, and vanished without leaving a single footprint. Deep within the Dulce sublevel 12 warehouse, Sam and Biff were not casually strolling, they were in a full-blown, tactical scramble. Their light-bending stealth suits shimmered and deactivated the second they crossed the threshold of the TR-3B Betsy's loading ramp. Sam practically dove into the pilot's seat, tearing his localized respirator mask off and tossing it onto the dash. "Get her started, Biff," Sam yelled, strapping himself in as Quigon, Tabby, and Soxy casually strolled past the center console, completely unfazed by the adrenaline. "The Watchers are literally walking through walls now. We need to bounce before that neuralized strike team wakes up from their popped-out coma." "Initiating primary cold pull sequence," Biff replied, his hands flying across the holographic interface in a blur of pearlescent motion. The massive, subdimensional engines began to whine, vibrating the heavy titanium hull. In the back, Scrub had already secured the Supermax volcano vaporizer, and was busy recalibrating the Atlas cannabis terrarium to ensure maximum power output. "I am currently running the control sequence and mapping the Atlas internet connection overlay," Biff announced, his optical sensors glowing bright blue as he fed the encrypted quantum data into the nav computer. "The botanical boost is providing unprecedented processing bandwidth. We have a clear window for a subdimensional jump. Calculating new vector now." Sam grabbed the yoke, a massive grin spreading across his face as the crushing weight of the subterranean black site began to dissolve around them. "Set the vector for the Pacific, Biff," Sam commanded, pulling up the targeting grid coordinates. "Lahaina, Maui." Target Biff's head tilted slightly. "Hawaii, Sam. That is a highly populated civilian zone." "Exactly," Sam laughed, pulling his trusty fedora down tight. "The Watchers won't be looking for a stealth-class UFO parked near the beach. If we make it out of this mesa fast enough, we can spend some serious downtime catching waves. I need to serve this adrenaline off." Biff locked in the coordinates. 1. Lahaina vector confirmed. Engaging cold pull in 3, 2. Reality folded like origami, and the Betsy vanished from the cavernous warehouse, leaving nothing behind but the faint, lingering scent of exotic lunar nugs. The reptilian gag reflex in the monkeypod tree. Subterranean black site management was usually a breeze, holding mankind in a state of perpetual, oblivious slavery certainly had its ups and downs, but as Vane stared at his blank monitors, he had to admit today was trending severely downward. His elite diamond team was completely unresponsive. The level 7 containment alarms were screaming. The biometric telemetry for the Atlas pilot had briefly spiked completely off the charts before flatlining into static. Vane had had enough. Adjusting the cuffs of his flawlessly tailored Versace skin disguise, he stormed out of his office and keyed himself into the secure express elevator. Initiating a direct drop to level 7, he needed to ascertain with his own slitted eyes exactly what had happened to his extraction team and his captive space god. 3 floors above the containment zone, Commander Arzenk was currently sitting on the floor of the cafeteria, deeply lost in dreamy, cosmic thoughts while aggressively devouring cold fast food directly from the fridge. Down on level 7, the elevator doors hissed open. Vane stepped out into the corridor, his boots clicking sharply on the concrete. He took a massive, furious breath to bellow in order and instantly regretted it. He had just inhaled a lungful of Scrub's weaponized, 0-point Atlas strain THC. For a human, the vapor induced profound philosophical contemplation in the munchies. For a high-ranking reptilian entity, the exotic botanical compound acted as a catastrophic neural suppressant. It was the exact chemical opposite of everything his cold-blooded physiology required. Vane froze. The vertical slits of his eyes violently rolled backward into his skull. A wave of profound, terrifying nausea hit him, a sensation utterly vile and foreign to a reptilian. He actually felt like gagging. Panic seized him as the structural integrity of his disguise began to fail. He frantically clamped both hands over his mouth, terrified that his massive, true reptilian jawline was about to drop right through the expensive synthetic human skin. Gargling something incoherent, Vane mashed the elevator button, hurled himself back into the cab, and hammered the button for the surface levels, desperate to return to normal, unmedicated air. Meanwhile, 238,900 miles away, the atmosphere inside the Atlas was a stark contrast to the subterranean chaos of Dulce. It was a scene of pure, cosmic jubilation. The pilot had materialized directly onto the grand deck, his glowing, patriarchal form fully restored to its rightful place. The 7 ancient sentinels bowed in absolute reverence, their geometric forms shimmering with relief. But the true welcome came from the deck floor. Exactly 144 cats, a sacred, resonant base 144 feline geometry were weaving around the pilot's glowing legs, vibrating the crystalline architecture with a massive, synchronized purr. Resting perfectly in the center of the grand pilot's chair was a meticulously crafted, holographic welcome home card. The universe's greatest star tours were officially back in business. Back on Earth. The TR-3B Betsy slipped seamlessly through the Hawaiian atmosphere, engaging its localized cloaking field as it descended over the warm, azure waters of the Pacific. Sam guided the massive, triangular craft inland, expertly threading the needle to touch down silently in the lush, tropical backyard of their home in Lahaina. Betsy settled gently into the grass, perfectly shaded beneath the massive, sprawling canopy of an old monkeypod tree. The boarding ramp lowered with a soft hiss, letting in the sweet, salt-tinged island breeze. Angel was already walking out the back door to greet them, her face lighting up with a smile as Sam hopped down the ramp, tossing his fedora onto a nearby lawn chair. Tap tap tappity tap. Scrub floated down the ramp right behind him, its mechanical arms wildly tapping out Morse code against its own chassis. The little drone was vehemently demanding they move the ship, calculating that the monkeypod tree sap-drop ratio would ruin the Betsy's radar-absorbent coating within 48 hours. Sam ignored the swearing robot and wrapped Angel in a hug, brought the whole crew back. Mission accomplished. And we right on cue. Cloclops trotted down the ramp. The angelic feline cyborg gave her metallic wings a brief stretch in the tropical sun, clearly already getting herself into the mindset for a few lazy days on the warm sand. Biff stepped out last, carrying a sleek, custom-engineered surfboard under one pearlescent arm. He scanned the horizon, calculating the wave swells at the local breaks. The surf conditions appear optimal, Sam, Biff noted in his smooth, synthetic voice. Just remember, Sam pointed a finger at the android, have to paddle. No gravity assists this time. You actually. Biff didn't reply, though his optical sensors gave a faint, deceptive flicker. He fully intended to cheat. The end.